Hello, everybody. Really great to see you all. Happy if you're here by accident or on purpose. So it's always awesome to kind of connect and talk to people, see some new faces, and move forward. So I'm Matthew Slatz. I'm one of the members of the Virginia Solidarity Economy Network. And tonight we're here for a talk we're calling Building a New Virginia. Our focus tonight is really about trying to kind of connect and build bridges across all the amazing work that's going on. So we're really excited to have both Emma Kelly from Appalachian Voices and Ben Mansky, and maybe one of our other comrades will pop in. Not sure. We'll see. April is supposed to be here, but she might have got caught up with something different. So let me do a quick welcome and we'll kind of kick it off and get moving forward. And hopefully a few more people will show up. And as you noticed, we are recording this for all of the futures that we're going to live in. And so we're excited and hopeful that's all right with everybody. Document it for later on. We just want to start again, like saying, everybody, thanks for coming tonight. These learn-ins are an opportunity for us to kind of bring voices together from around Virginia and from outside of Virginia when it seems right. And we are working to not only respond to the constant crises that are impacting our communities, but also build new projects, systems, infrastructures that realize the values of democracy, equity, sustainability, solidarity, and pluralism. Those are like the core values of a solidarity economy. Last month, we held a kickoff event called Feel to Real. That brought us together to share how our immediate responses to racism and pandemics and environmental degradation are spurring new projects and new efforts in our communities. And we heard both about the importance of centering care in our communities, but also that we cannot expect traditional institutions to be leaders in responding to those issues. And so VASEN is committed to being a space where those doing that work can share knowledge, inspire new ideas, and build new economic worlds across the state of Virginia. So tonight, as I said, the topic, our theme is called Building a New Virginia. And we invited several people from around the state to share their work. So what's going on? What are they doing? What's driving that work? And how are they finding ways of working together to strengthen and magnify each other is a big piece of what we're talking about tonight. So we've got Emma Kelly from Appalachian Voices, who facilitates the New Economy Network, which is kind of located in Southwestern Virginia. Ben Mansky's faculty at George Mason University, and he's with the Next System Studies program. And so we're excited to have them here. Before we really kick off, I also wanted to do a land acknowledgement. We borrow this from our friends at the Nonprofit Democracy Network because it was beautifully written and we want to borrow it. So we acknowledge that we belong to the land and the land does not belong to us. We are each on land that has been tended by indigenous peoples who are in deep relationship with the land for the benefit of both human and non-human beings. And these indigenous peoples are still here today and may still be on their ancestral lands, still embodying and preserving essential wisdom in the face of colonization, all of whose lives reflect the beauty that lies beyond colonization. And we bow to those people living and ancestral, and we acknowledge that each of us comes from a line that at some point was rooted in a place. So we invite you all to take a moment to acknowledge the peoples that belong to the land that you are on, and to learn and to share the names if you know them, or you can go to nativeland.ca and share those lands. And maybe in the middle of that, also introduce yourselves with your name and your pronouns and your land acknowledgement. And we use these names to remind us that the names given to land by colonizers are a fiction, that many of us have arrived where we are through the force of colonization, and that our visions of the future need not be limited by the system's attempts to appear as inevitable. So we commit in our work to address the histories, the forces that have stolen and renamed land, and to work towards transformative relationships that can shift power, resources, and land back to Indigenous peoples. Format for this evening, again, we're inviting speakers to kind of share for about 10 to 15 minutes, a little bit about the work that they're doing, but the work that they're doing, which is actually organizing, it's also studying and working with those groups. And then what we're going to do after the talk, we're going to do a little bit of synthesis, trying to pull together some themes that have come forward in the conversation. And we invite those listening in to like jump on the chat if an idea pops up that you're like, do you think is interesting or you want to be critical of or anything, just throw it up on the chat. We'd love to have that. And then we'll do a little bit of kind of organizing, very kind of pop ed style, like conversation about some of those ideas. And then we'll wrap up with an appreciation led by Lindsay. Does that all sound good? Everybody sounds great. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Emma. Do you mind going first?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, I'm Emma Kelly. I'm the New Economy Field Coordinator for Appalachian Voices, and I facilitate the New Economy Network. Appalachian Voices, if you haven't heard of us, we're a regional environmental justice nonprofit. We work out of North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, and a little bit in East Tennessee. Mostly looking at the legacy impacts of coal and fossil fuels and creating new sustainable economic development. And the New Economy Network is our grassroots way of going about that work. So the New Economy Network, like I said, it's our grassroots group of local leaders and residents who are interested in helping build a new and sustainable economy in the coalfield region of Virginia. So I do mean the absolute southwest corner, not Roanoke, not Blacksburg, even more southwest, Lee, Wise, Scott, Dickinson, Buchanan, Russell, and Tazewell counties. So really, you know, hell and gone away from Richmond. We were founded in 2014, and we're not an actual organization in and of ourselves. It's more of a networking platform and issue forum. So that's why I say I facilitate it. I'm not the leader. I just, you know, plan the meetings and make sure people are in contact with each other. We're typically organized with 3 subgroups working on different issue areas. So over the past year, we've had a group working on land ownership, entrepreneurship, and then workforce support, more specifically childcare access. Our members drive the work of the group. As I'm sure anybody here who's done grassroots organization knows, you cannot create any sort of lasting change if it's not deeply motivated by the values and aspirations of the folks carrying out the work. And most folks participating in this network are volunteering their time while also balancing their own lives and full-time employment. So to us, it's really important to be mindful of folks' time and energy to make sure that that time and energy isn't being wasted and that it's being spent on things that align with their convictions. As you can see in this diagram, we're joined with folks from several different backgrounds, each of whom brings something unique to our work. And we use tools like community engagement and policy advocacy and a roots up approach to work towards the common goal, which is environmentally and socially beneficial economic growth in the Southwest Virginia coalfields. NIN members are guided by 4 principles. We have sustainable economic growth and development is necessarily intertwined with sound environmental stewardship, right? You have to work with the land. You can't just work through it. That's a bad idea. Issues of environmental and economic justice should always be considered and valued when making decisions about the future of our region. We are stronger through collaboration, and everyone's voice and perspective is equally important and will be given equal consideration with discussions and decisions. We live in a region that has been defined for over a century by extractive industries like coal mining and logging. Several of us, NIN members, Appalachian Voices employees, owe our livelihoods to those industries, knowing that we had those in our families before us who took those jobs specifically to provide for future generations. However, decades of extraction has left the coal fields with absentee corporate landowners, a degraded and often dangerous landscape, widespread poverty, and deserts of just about every sort. So food, healthcare, childcare, education, If it is a type of socioeconomic desert, we have it in Southwest Virginia. With these issues in mind, NIN members set 4 goals: providing a space for individuals across the region to collaborate and share information on relevant topics, elevating our commonly held issues to state and regional representatives and influencing those decision makers to include the perspective of local community members. A lot of times that perspective is left out, whether it's because agencies have a lack of capacity or because representatives don't really care. We see that gap a lot and we seek to fill it. We also want to build community level power and influence by representing the network throughout the state and region as a collaborative. And then of course, growing the number of interested and engaged individuals who actively participate in the network. As far as specifics for our member base, like I said, we have a lot of folks from really diverse backgrounds, and a lot of times it's folks who have moved out of Appalachia and then are moving back later in life, coming back to their home roots. Some of our core member groups are environmentally and socially focused organizing groups. So Appalachian Voices, Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards, the Clinch Coalition, and then their parent organization, which is Virginia Organizing. The vast majority of our members are what I like to call real on the ground folk. That's residents, students, business owners, retired activists. And then we also are joined by other stakeholders who often play a less engaged role, but are still vital to the success of the network. And those are larger environmental and social organizations, typically nationwide ones, as well as local officials and educational representatives. We meet virtually every month, and we've actually just started bringing back our in-person gatherings every 3 months, which is very exciting because they tend to have slightly higher turnout. The subgroups tend to have smaller separate meetings. So generally, there's a really good range for people to get involved to the extent which they can. If you want to be in a subgroup and be in a meeting every couple of weeks, you can. If you simply want to show up to a monthly meeting, that's fine. And then if you want to come every 3 months to an in-person gathering to network, chat, eat some refreshments and touch on the big topics, that's awesome as well. As far as NIN's past accomplishments, I do want to preface this by saying I started this job in May, so I haven't really been involved with any of these. But the big one is that NIN members drafted a land ownership bill for large-scale landowners with Delegate Terry Kilgore. Unfortunately, it ended up not being introduced into the General Assembly, but it was a wonderful chance to build a working relationship with Delegate Kilgore, and it's provided a very useful blueprint for any future legislative action. We have also worked with the Appalachian Land Study to create an online interactive maps for accessible land records, held a series of community listening sessions, and then also hosted several educational and networking community events. We had a really, really big one on co-ops, which was very successful, and then others on things like hemp, sustainable forestry. Again, lots of things based on working with the land instead of just extracting from it. We have also successfully engaged in policy advocacy. I think the biggest examples that come to my head are the Brightfields Act and then the Power Plant Transparency and Community Preparation Act. We were pleased to see those pass the General Assembly. As far as our current goals and work, our longest running subgroup has worked on equitable land ownership. Of course, we have had just so much absentee and corporate-owned land ownership, which prevents equitable economic growth. It prevents widespread land reclamation, and it prevents communal use of the land. Over the past several months, our members have been meeting with various county officials to learn about existing record systems, given that in several cases, those records are inaccurate and inaccessible. And of course, accurate and accessible knowledge is at the cornerstone of a just society, making sure people have those resources. Several of the counties are actually implementing new GIS systems around the new year. So we're hoping to do an educational push, making sure people are aware of those and know how to use the available GIS systems. Our entrepreneurship subgroup is rolling out a survey in collaboration with Opportunity Southwest Virginia, just to gather data on what existing entrepreneurs need in the region. And then that will help shape our future strategies. And then workforce support, like I said, is looking at childcare, and we've been meeting with the existing childcare providers, which is mostly UVA Wise and United Way. And we hope to provide their stakeholder engagement and community outreach for their future projects. So if people are interested in getting involved, we have a mailing list. Not only will that get you the monthly meeting invites, but also that's where we send out funding announcements, local events that are both fun and educational, and then volunteer opportunities with our member groups. We also have active Facebook and Instagram pages. And then if you're interested in speaking with Nin, attending a meeting, or you just have a question about the network, you can email me, call me, text me, all of the above. And yeah, so that's the New Economy Network.
I noticed that April has joined us, and I know that she has to go off to something else. So April, do you mind going next and sharing a little bit about the work that you all are doing at Highlander around solidarity economy, both like past and future?
Sure. Yeah. So forgive me, I do not have a pretty slide presentation that I can share right now. I'm on a mobile device. So, but hello, everybody. My name is April. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on the economics and governance team at Highlander. I believe Janae is also with this. Janae is the cultural organizer at Highlander. And so we have collaborated on some of the work we've done most recently at Highlander regarding solidarity economy. Highlander really got intentionally involved in solidarity economy work in 2008, participating in a World Social Forum, and they began developing curriculum around the solidarity economy. And so we have our Mapping Our Futures curriculum, which can be done as a 3-hour, 1-day, or 3-day workshop, and really actually can be studied over much longer than 3 days. It's made up of 7 modules that folks can move through in whatever order feels right for them. It is downloadable from Highlander's website. And then, of course, if you're in the South, since Highlander specifically focuses on accompanying people in the South, if you are in the South, you can reach out to us and we can try to support you through either learning that curriculum or facilitating that curriculum in your community. If you're looking for something that's maybe not quite so intensive, then we have a racial capitalism workshop that is available in the toolkit that is on our website, where you'll also find some workshops on our methodologies like popular education and cultural organizing, as well as community organizing workshop and a couple other ones as well. So feel free to check that out. It will cue you to enter your contact information before it will let you download it. So don't let that throw you off. Just go ahead and enter that information and check out that goodness there. And then part of what we've done this last fiscal year and the fiscal year before that is we've hosted the Southern Beyond Survival Solidarity Squadship program. And it's where we have looked to accompany groups of 2 to 4 organizers who are doing solidarity economy organizing in their communities. In the first one, of course, it fell, the beginning of the program fell around the time when folks were really starting to return to normal, quote unquote, with COVID and that kind of thing. And we really we knew that folks had, because of the way systems started to fall apart when the pandemic first began, we knew that there were communities who had started to do mutual aid work and found other ways to cooperatively meet needs that the system was not meeting. And so we wanted to be able to provide some intentional accompaniment to those folks who were just starting out in solidarity economy organizing, and resource source their work as well to hopefully make it more sustainable. That program's been really successful. The first year we were able to help a group in Gadsden, Alabama, called RAIN, which stands for Race Against Injustice Now. They have a mutual aid store where we were able to help them continue to rent the building for another year. And make their work more sustainable. There is the Black Empowerment Team out of Mobile, Alabama, who had done some food justice work with feeding people, and they were able to establish themselves as a 501 or a 401(c). And then let's see, We had a group from Lexington. It looks like Janae's dropping a link to a video about the squadship programs. It'll let you know more about these folks and the program. But there was a group from Lexington who had come together much the way Rain had in the uprisings during the summer of 2020. And so we saw multiple groups, including the group from Lexington, where folks started out doing abolition work. And then just by the nature of the way liberation work unfolds, these folks found themselves engaging in mutual aid and other kinds of solidarity economy work. And so folks in Lexington are, when they polled the community, one of the most pressing issues was folks felt like they needed more secure and safe housing to feel like they were able to live their lives free from harm. And so folks in Lexington are working on implementing harm-free zones. And what we mean by harm-free zones is what Spirit House in Durham means by harm-free zones. So feel free to look up Spirit House and check out their website. There's some really awesome videos there that explain what harm-free zones are and kind of what the pillars or values of them are. And then let's see, Janae, help me out. What's the other group? Oh, so we worked with a group in Knoxville, a squad that was actually made up of two different teams. One of the teams was from a place called The Bottom, which is a Black bookstore cafe space where folk in a neighborhood that had been historically Black, but was gentrifying. They came together to hold this space. And the folks who teamed up with them were from a group called SIC, Service Industry something. I apologize, I do not remember the rest of it, but it's a group of service worker folks who came together during the pandemic because a lot of folks who worked in the food industry, of course, all of a sudden found themselves without income and needed to be able to feed themselves and figure out childcare and all sorts of things. And so that was that group. And then this most recent round of squadships, we've seen two groups who are doing housing justice work. And then we have a group of Latinx folks in Texas who are doing some mutual aid work and accompanying folks who, most of them are mothers, some who are documented, some who are not. And so they're helping them meet their needs and are really leaning into allowing things to be governed by the folks who they've been providing these services to. So it'll be really interesting to see how they continue to allow that to happen. They're also going to participatory budget some funding that they received from Highlander with the people that they serve. And they're also looking at trying to support some of the women to potentially launch a worker cooperative. And then we also worked with, let's see, Janae, are you still there? You gonna help me out? Let's see, Margins is a group in Birmingham, Alabama.
I am still here. I'm down to tag in, so you can take a if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell the people about the work a little.
I mean, hey everybody, I'm Janae. I'm the one who crashed this call. I appreciate you all for your kindness. I'm from DC, so I'm kind of close. Virginia, I've been there before. I think some of the biggest takeaways, I would say, I mean, we have margins, of course. We have groups all over, and I've dropped that information so you can dig more deep into each one of those groups. But I think what I'd like to lift up is that it's a pedagogy, that we think about solidarity economy as a practice, similar to what folks were talking about earlier, that we want to think about this as like mutual aid versus, of course, like charity work, right? It takes all of us to do this whole thing. And there are so many people across the South, from Mississippi, still rural Mississippi to, I mean, West Virginia. I mean, there's so many examples that our generations have been doing this forever. And as an organization born out of coal mining, like, I think we know for a fact that it takes all of us to heal a thing. So super pumped to be here. one of the trainings that was developed became a train the trainers program, so stay on the lookout for that, where we actually train folks, well, not me, but April and other members of the economics and governance team train folks in the mapping our futures curriculum, which I think is a wonderful way to adapt to like young people and older folks. I mean, just it's a great intergenerational curriculum that I think, and it's also available in Spanish. So that's something that we also have. And then we'll of course be open back up pretty soon for retreat space. So come down like Matthew, hang out on the hill for a little bit. All right. Yeah. April's super dope. If you get a chance to watch,
right? Yeah.
Do that.
Right. So again, I encourage y'all to check out the toolbox. I am really excited about some of the things that came out of homecoming. We were able to start a conversation both in person and online on what we would include in the Southern People's Manifesto regarding solidarity economy, because of course we know that there are the values and framework that came out of the 2-year international process, and we think they're great. We're not trying to do away with them or anything, but we know that Southern people have been doing this work for generations, long before people ever thought to call it solidarity economy. And so we really want people who have been living this and know this in a very instinctual way to be able to articulate the values and strategies that work for them as they do this work, instead of having to simply adopt what some other folks have said about it. So definitely also look out for, sign up for the View if you have not signed up for it. If you go to Highlander's website, it will be the first pop-up that you get to sign up for our newsletter, so that you can get communication about when we will hold the second conversation around what we want that manifesto to look like. And yeah, thanks for y'all's time this evening. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me at april@highlandercenter.org.
I'm Janae at highlandercenter.org.
Thanks all. I really appreciate you all coming on and sharing. Highlander's always been an amazing resource, and did a lot of help like early on with VASEN, just kind of getting us thinking and moving forward. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ben Mansky from George Mason of the Next System Study Program.
Yeah. Hi there. You were all able to hear me? I just want to check that first. All right, very good. And I just got to say, it was a pleasure to hear from Emma and from April and Janae just now, and it's great to share space with all of you and to be able to make more of these connections. I'll just say a little bit about myself. I'm an assistant professor of sociology here at George Mason University. This is a new role in the scheme of things for me. I've been here just over 2 years, but I come out of movement work going back to the 80s. Largely grew up in Wisconsin, done a lot of different kinds of work, lived in the cooperative sector, labor, farm labor, environmental justice, you name it. So that's, there's a lot of history and networks that I bring with me to my research and work. I do have some slides to share with you guys today, and these are not necessarily designed for this conversation. They're just all, general purpose slides, but I think it should give you some sense of what we've been up to here at Mason, and I hope this works. I've never done, oh, that's a nice effect. All right. So we do have this new program at Next System Studies, at George Mason University. It's an interdisciplinary program. That's just to say that we've been working with people outside of the social sciences and humanities, all kinds of interesting coalitions, trying to get people involved from business and management, people in nursing, computer science, certainly environmental studies, as well as some of the more obvious kinds of connections that you might expect that we're making. I just want to give you a little bit of background in terms of where we're coming from, where this project came out of, and then some of the things we're actually very actively doing right now. That sound good? Okay, very good. All right, so first of all, what I'll say is that Next System Studies, as some of you may be aware, has a relationship with a project that was launched in 2014, I believe, called the Next System Project. And that project was launched with a lot of fanfare. Danny Glover and all kinds of other folks, cut a nice video to launch the effort. And there were a number of very sort of useful early offerings through the Next System Project, all kinds of white papers and books. And something I was involved with was putting together teach-ins, the Next System teach-ins that took place on a number of university campuses around the country. This is the University of California at Santa Barbara, where we had 2,000 people take part in the Next System teach-in about 5 or 6 years ago. And Next System Studies, is sort of based in, I think, a series of assumptions about what's happening in our world right now and what that means for both organizing and for movement strategy, and also for researchers who are embedded in movements, right? And so I've got these theses up here, and people can go back and look at them. I borrow these largely from Gar, who I'm sure many of you know personally, Garl Perovitz, who's speaking up there in this picture. But there's some adjustments that we made in our approach to it as we've been building Next System Studies. So first of all, one of those theses, just one of those propositions, is that this is not a period of immediate collapse in the United States, but instead of a long punctuated decline. That's just to say the system is not coming immediately down. When I was involved in the first movement in the 90s, we had a bumper sticker that said "Visualize industrial collapse." Well, industrial collapse is not happening so quickly, right? And so that is happening, right? So we're in a longer period of decline. There are, in addition to sort of the larger declines in the global political economy, the world system, there are two additional drivers of system change that we're all experiencing on a daily basis: the climate crisis, and of course, the sort of Web 3.0 technological revolutions, the spatial web, the metaverse, AI, and all of this. And so what that means is that a new system is coming. Regardless of whether we want one or not, there's going to be a new system. The system we have is in dysfunction. And, any kind of sort of hopes that we might be able to return to a path that a lot of people invested in the United States in the 20th century, which is sometimes called social democracy, right? In the mid 20th century, the idea that the power of working people could be strong enough that you could have an agreement with the state and that you could sort of force compromises with the capitalist state that would produce something livable for the vast majority of people. That's not going to happen, right? Maybe at one point there was some hope that was going to happen. Maybe in the 1970s when I was born, I can still remember those years, that could have happened, but that can't happen anymore because labor's just not there in the same way. So we need something new. We need some new strategies. That's not, from my perspective, that doesn't mean unions aren't a part of the strategy. Like I'm fourth generation union member, but they're not, but we can't rely on the labor movement to provide that direction. Elements of a potential next system are already emerging. That's to say a next system that we might actually want. All of us on this call are part of that next system, right? And the question becomes what kind of system we actually want and how do we get there, right? So those are theses that we've been using to sort of explain to other people who've never heard of the Solidarity Economy movement or the New Economy Coalition or New Economy Networks or any of this, so where we're coming from as academics, right? And so in building a project around Next System Studies, we've had to sort of define, well, what is it that this area of study is all about? It's a pretty big set of questions. And we've introduced at Mason and more broadly, a series of questions that we call the Next System questions. And they are, where are we going and where do we need to go? How might we get there? And what must we do to get there? Right. So what this means in terms of scholarship is these are questions of system design. Where do we need to go? System change, how might we get there? There's different kinds of pathways: revolution, social transformation, reconstruction, to system change. And then what must we do to get there? Well, that's what movements are all about, right? Trying to figure that out, right? So that's how we've been sort of thinking about the work that we've been engaged in. So I want to get to the sort of brass tacks of what we've actually been doing at Mason. We only launched about a year and a half ago. We had sort of a big launch event on Earth Day of 2021. And since then, we've been building what we are very consciously thinking of as a model program at George Mason University that can relate to other efforts in universities and colleges around the world, and that we want people to look at, critique, learn from, and engage with. So for us, Our work involves engaged research. That's to say research that it gets its hands dirty, right? That's involved in changing the world. Speakers and symposium, a fellowship program. So basically that's to say teaching, right? And visiting scholars, right? And so some of you, I'm sure all of you recognize Jessica Gordon-Nembhard. She came to campus this past year for a major event we had. And that's Joe Guinan, who is Vice President of the Democracy Collaborative, speaking with students at Mason this past spring as well. So let me just talk about a few elements of this. One thing we brought online this past spring was a Next System Fellows program. This is a upper division undergraduate program. It's part of an existing project at Mason that's called the Arlington Fellows. So there's already peace building fellows and global politics fellows, and there's a new group that's migration, which is essentially pro-immigration, pro-immigrant rights group that's gotten together this past year. So there's 6 or 7 fellowship programs, and the Next System Fellows is one of the 2 newest of these. And you can see pictures of our first 8 Next System Fellows from this past spring, all of whom are actually still working with us in some capacity, even though most of them have graduated since then. It involves an internship, so a 6-credit internship practicum. So actually some of you will recognize Jimena Espinoza, who interned with VASEN this past spring. She was a Next System Fellow, and others, interned with Code Pink and Move to Amend and other organizations. And then the students take 4 courses together, a core seminar on social change in the next system, where people read everybody from Öcalan and Rosa Luxemburg to looking at, contemporary cases, that all of you are engaged with. And then we have other courses that deal with technology and society and the state. And of course, there's the practicum. So that's one thing we've been doing. And we're gearing up for our 2nd round of fellows this coming spring. We're taking applications. We're hoping to double to somewhere around 15 to 16 fellows for the spring. The second project we have is a community engaged research project that's called Democratizing NOVA. So I think most of you know that NOVA is sort of the local but both it's our community college system here, but it's also the region. It's Northern Virginia. And this is a project that is basically mapping all the efforts to democratize not just politics, but also the economy, culture, law, history, you name it, here in Northern Virginia. So we have 15 categories of initiatives that we are tracking. We've had dozens of students and faculty and staff working on this and just putting in a few hours here and there, or lots of hours. And we've identified over 160 initiatives at this point that meet our criteria for democratization initiatives, and a lot more co-ops and other kinds of forms of public and community ownership than I would have expected coming in as a deep Yankee, basically. So a lot of great stuff that's happening here. And so through this process, we've been able to build partnerships with all kinds of organizations. We have some that are actually pretty tight now, some interesting partnerships. And the vision is to build the capacity to have a strategic process for transitioning to a post-capitalist political economy in this region, right? So that's what we're doing right now. We also have a new project we launched last year that's in community design digital technology. So this is basically an effort to put together a design process that's bottom-up, participatory, in which technologists and community-based, businesses, all of us, right, can get together and actually designed not just a platform cooperative, but a platform Commonwealth for not just Northern Virginia, but for the DMV, for DC, Maryland, and Virginia, for this region. That's something we're working on. We're trying to get funding. We have grad students who are working on this, actually, amazing people. The third project is around participatory constitutional design, and this one's just getting off the ground, sort of working with the Towards a People's Constitution process, Resist and Build, which some of you are involved with, many other folks around basically bringing a really growing, there's an incredible amount of scholarship that's happening in universities all over the world, in legal studies and social sciences and so on, around popular constitutionalism and constitutional change. We just want to bring that into greater engagement with movements that are doing the work, especially here in the States. The final thing I'll just say is that we are looking to anchor a much broader Next System Studies Association. So this is an initiative of ours, and we've been building ties with all kinds of similar kinds of projects. There's the Solidarity Economy Scholars Network, there's community wealth building, there's in law and society, there's something called prefigurative politics, utopian legalities and radical governance. I mean, there's just all kinds, there's scores of these new emergent academic networks, and we're just working to build ties between them so that we can have something larger. So that's basically it. I wasn't keeping track of time, so I hope I didn't go over, but as I said, I'm just really happy to be here with all of you. And yeah, I hope that this leads to a lot more. I'm sure it will.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, all of our wonderful guests who have been pre-scheduled. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to throw open the discussion to the floor, and I see many people, some folks who I know, who have a lot to add. By way of opening this next discussion, I'll share with you a little bit of what I've heard so far. In the first three panels, a theme that emerged for me was land. I kept hearing about land, especially in our first two speakers. I kept hearing about understanding what's going on. And a comment that particularly stuck with me during Ben's presentation was in the chat by Emma, who said that a key issue that they're struggling with is how to make sure folks can meet their immediate needs, food, rent, gas, on a large scale, while not replicating inequitable capitalist patterns by simply bringing in new businesses and exploiting natural resources and so on. And a good portion of our folks who were talking about land were talking about land that had been despoiled by extractive coal mining. Now, what I've tried to model just here is a technique that we call synthesis, and I'll pull on Project South here that some folks here know, to say what this process is. So in doing this, I tried to listen to the strength of the assertions that were being made in what we just heard, the frequency with which topics were coming up. Childcare came up repeatedly, and the volume. If there were certain ideas that just really stood out, and that's where I highlighted what Emma was saying, because that was a statement not from a theoretical level or just a common conversation level, but people's actual lived experience. So with that, I'll throw this in the chat and I'll hand the keys back over to folks to facilitate discussion from the floor. Thank you all so much. And Frank Mosley, welcome. You haven't had a chance to introduce yourself. If you would like, I think folks would be very interested. And if not, that's all good.
Thank you, Pody. I appreciate the invitation as well as the opportunity to learn more about the work that you all are doing. Yes, my name is Frank Mosley. I am a man who wears many hats. I am executive director of my own nonprofit, Seed for All, Social Education for Economic Development. We have a pretty robust initiative that works in a number of spaces to fill the gaps around employability, entrepreneurship, and financial education. I am also the director of the Democracy Center program for the Center for Common Ground, a national program that focuses on getting out the vote in underserved and BIPOC communities. And I am involved in a number of conversations around reparations as well, as I serve on the board of an organization called RAISER, Resolutions Against Systemic Racism. And so what I am hearing is very insightful, learning more about the Western region of the state and some of their needs and how they're really relate to the work that kind of the common thread that goes through all the work that we do, and addressing, as someone, rent, food, and housing. These are all issues and concerns that we focus on and try to address as pain points and find resources to alleviate those pain points. And whether it's mutual aid or whether it's somehow raising funds or creating strategic partnerships to allow us to be able to facilitate some of these resources in a very succinct and impactful way. But I am just at this moment just trying to learn as much as I can about the work you do, and really understand how these proposed models and ideas are scalable. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate that. So I guess I would open it up to anybody to a thought, curiosity, the people that have spoken so far. Like, are there any threads that you're hearing from the other speakers that are resonating with you at the moment? No, that was too many questions also. Emma, do you want to share a little bit more about the question that you brought forward? I think it's a really good one. Like, where is that coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me try and think about like how to really expand on it. Just with the work I do, a lot of the proposed solutions, when we look at Southwest Virginia and the coal fields and Central Appalachia, when you see, high poverty rates, high unemployment, it's, we need more businesses, we need more diverse businesses, which is good. But very, very rarely do those conversations address things like co-ops, communal lands. I know a big conversation going on in my area right now is about ecotourism, specifically about ATV trails, huge, or I guess supposedly a huge economic driver, but also at what cost? And then how do you balance that with taking care of the land instead of, in that case, literally working your way over it. And so we see those solutions being pitched a lot. And actually, as I'm sure you all are aware, in Governor Youngkin's energy plan, a nuclear reactor being pitched in our neck of the woods as well, as a job creator. And we have at the same time all these groups working for these amazing like new systems, equitable systems. But there's a huge disconnect in having those systems implemented and then making sure people can eat and have, a roof over their head. And the biggest bridge that I've seen so far is just mutual aid. Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards has had an amazing mutual aid program. They have actually inspired UVA-Y students to start their own mutual aid program. But that can only go so far unless we, I think, really invest 100% into trying to get those new systems implemented instead of, slowly creeping towards them.
I would just like to ask, just because I'm still learning more about the region and some of the challenges that you have there specifically. And I know every community has their own specific challenges, but is the fact that the desire to change and move away from these types of jobs that take away from the natural resources there, and even you talked about the eco trails, is it the challenge to find jobs to replace those jobs, or is it to be able to provide the resources for the, as we would call them, the pain points that you outlined there?
I would say it's a mix of both, and you have, especially in the coal fields, a unique combination of historical and economic processes that have happened. So I mentioned large-scale corporate and absentee land ownership. So I think in Wise County, 55% of the land is owned by 3 large landowners. And so you have sort of this funnel effect where you have, abandoned mine lands, old industrial sites, large landowners who oftentimes want to get rid of this land. And that just makes it perfect for things like ecotourism. And in those cases, you have that nice streamline to ecotourism, to that new development. And the community and community stakeholders have no path to get involved and no path to have a say or really hold a stake in that negotiation and that development. So I don't know if that really answered your question.
Yeah, and it did. I mean, it addressed the heart of the problem there, and at least for me, created some more clarity. Is it that they are not aware of co-ops and how they work and the benefits of them, or here in Virginia, we're also looking at community land. I mean, excuse me, not here in Virginia, but in parts of Virginia, we're looking at community land trust as a way to protect landowners. And to create sustainable revenue models to accompany them, provide wraparound support services. So I'm just trying to figure out what it is that really meets the needs of that community. Because if you are looking at developing and what it is that you are developing. Are you thinking about affordable housing and how that creates jobs, and then healthcare and health clinics and how that creates jobs, as well as provides resources, valuable resources to the community? And so I'm just throwing things out there as far as things that may have been considered. I don't know, but just wondering, why haven't these conversations kind of matured in a way that you feel have been effective to be able to advance the conversation in the movement?
Yeah. I think the first thing you said around education is a really, really big one. There are a lot of amazing resources for folks coming to the area, especially if they want to start a business. Almost none of them address co-ops and equitable models. They're almost all traditional, and it's really up to grassroots groups to spread the word and have that education and promote those models. So I would say education, and then simply the giant disparity in resources and power. We've had people come in interested in starting co-ops, and they go to their county officials, they go to the industrial development authority for their county, and oftentimes those folks are tied to the fossil fuel industries or to extractive industries, and they just say no, or they make it very difficult for them.
Understood. Thank you.
There's an elephant in the room that I'm kind of keen on, which is ARPA funds. That's something that I haven't heard come up, and something that will be coming up, the infrastructure funding that's going to be coming up. When we talk about the state, when we talk about this, I think it was under-theorized at the time when a lot of these initiatives were kicked off, what really the power and potential of the state is. And that is maybe part of what has caught us unprepared. But ARPA funds, the federal government spent money into existence, which we now know it can do, without impacts on interest rates, unless the Fed chair decides so. And the former Prime Minister of Britain has had a harsh lesson in what we call modern monetary theory. Where are we? How does that come in to what we're doing here in the education at Highlander, and how we can be nimble about navigating on this changing terrain?
I just raised my hand and put it down, but I think that's an interesting follow-up to this question around sort of the immediate needs and the mounting crises and pressures that we can expect. It's going to get worse. And we'll be dealing with climate refugees throughout this region. And in terms of those southwestern parts of Virginia, you guys are going to be dealing with people who are climate refugees as well. And up here, we're trying to get people ready for what that's going to look like in terms of the politics in Northern Virginia. So I raise that simply to I say that simply to say that that kind of tension is going to be building around the immediate and then the near future. And then what you're bringing in there, PG, is something that I very much agree with. I, to some extent, have felt like this has been yet another learning track for me, because I'm not somebody who's used to sort of engaging with the state and the kind of ways that I'm being sort of compelled to now, like to recognize that, hey, there are people in various levels of government who come out of movements, and there are people who come out of our own institutions. We have partnerships with the county here that are proving quite meaningful. A lot of those folks are George Mason University graduates and came out of their own struggles and so on. And they have resources that I'm just not used to thinking about as being accessible, right? I personally, and I'm sure other people here do too, know people who, are in DC. I chose a different path. I come out of independent politics, direct action campaigning, you name it. But they're there, right? When we launched Next System Studies at Mason, Mark Pocan, who was co-chair of the Progressive Caucus in Congress for many years, is co-chair of the Cooperative Business Caucus and the Union Caucus in Congress. He was our keynote, right, for that. So the thing is yeah, the resources are there. They're going to be spent. They are being spent. And in fact, what we just went through may prove to be relatively small compared to what comes in a couple of years, right? So I guess what I would just say is what we're trying to do with democratizing NOVA in part is to get ready for that, to not be unprepared next time around and to be ready to move those resources quickly. There is the anchor institution strategy that the Democracy Collaborative has really worked on, a more top-down versus bottom-up model. We're trying to find ways up here to do that, to what that means for anybody who's not aware of that framing, but it just means taking the resources of major institutions and using them to finance conversion of existing businesses, startups, into cooperatives, into community ownership. And that's what we're very actively working to do right now. So that's part of how we're dealing with that gap between the needs and the strategy. And then I put in there that I had a question. So I don't want to take us away from this question because I'm interested in this question. I'll just put the other question out there too. I teach social movements, among other things. And so a student in a class today said, what is it that's particular about Virginia and social movements in Virginia that's different from other states? And my response was, I'm still learning, And I also said, look, things are obviously in this part of the state changing very quickly. Northern Virginia is just incredibly dynamic. It's a very exciting place to be right now. And in terms of organizing. And but that's the question: how do we do this as Virginia, right? How do we build the ties, deal with the regional differences, the animosities? Yeah, and that I see as the task or part of it. And I don't know.
Yeah, Ben, I think you got to a question that we wanted to use as our kind of like culminating question, because I think it is the big kind of the big thing in the room in terms of like, what does it mean to, I mean, we might use different language, right? We might call it next systems, we might call it solidarity economies, we might call it just transition. Like I mean, and we're all coming from a little different backgrounds. I similarly am a Midwesterner who now lives in Virginia. These traditions, these cultures that are here, that are rooted, like how do we build with them and for them in ways which I think, like thinking about, like that was the best thing about reading Jessica's book, was like actually seeing the wealth of Black like cooperative organizing that's historically happened in Virginia. And so that, that it's here, it's around, it's kind of, it's in the ground in ways that I, as a, an overeducated white guy, like may not see, and just start to like see that and recognize that and lift that up. But I think that is like the big question, like how can we make, because what I hear too is I hear similar conversations happening, like the cooperative conversation. I mean, DC has had a strong and still has a strong network of people developing and engaging. There's a somewhat of an ecosystem there. There's like conversations around that happening in Southwestern Virginia. Like I had a conversation last night in Richmond about cooperative ecosystems. There's a lawyer. We finally have a cooperative lawyer that's in Richmond, which is something we've been looking for. So we have that other knowledge base, and then building connections with the Domestic Workers Alliance or a Latina custodial cleaning workers cooperative that's starting up that has vision of something like replicating something like Poder Emma in North Carolina. So we're seeing these conversations happen, and it's like, how can we build these relationships to like strengthen them, magnify them, and not just continue the cycle of having the conversations, but actually build the infrastructure to realize them in some way or another. So I'm going to throw that out. So maybe some of the voices we haven't heard, like, not to put you on the spot, but Lindsay and Barbara, if you want to step in, you're always thinking wonderful things too. So, and you haven't spoken yet, and Patricia, you too. Like your knowledge is important here also.
It's such a deep question. It requires like at least 2 minutes minimum of thinking.
I'm really impressed with all these local and regional cross-sectoral collaborative alliances. And I think often what can happen is that you could have a particular endpoint having to do with, let's just say, economic development, which then might move into other areas of healthcare and health or housing development, and hopefully models that are customized from elsewhere. I found in my work over the years that when you have strong local cross-sectoral public-private nonprofit collaborative alliances that have built a history of accomplishments in one area where, to quote the Sharifs, you're working towards some superordinate goal, that basic structure can move into a whole network of web of different goals in different areas. And some communities do this and do it almost not naturally, but have the stick-to-itiveness is what I keep thinking of to do that kind of thing, and then others don't. And sometimes demographically and socioeconomically, they look similar, and but they're the community A's and the community B's, and some develop these sorts of structures, and others don't. It sounds like there's a lot of activity right now in certain parts of the state, and I guess I wish that this level of groundwork would get off the ground and will get off the ground in other parts of the state.
Janae, since you're going to leave us, I was just curious, like from your perspective at Highlander, like what do you see happening? Like what do you see? What networks do you see growing around the South? Like how are they building and working together, and what makes that possible?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. And I think one thing that makes it possible is a lesson that we all got from like Septima Clark and so many other people, like those who are living it, we center them and ask them what their experience is, and we go from there. I think one of the best things about the citizenship schools, when they were formed, and for those who citizenship schools were how they registered voters before the Civil Rights Act in '64, and or right after the Civil Rights Act, that Septima would go into towns for 2 weeks and then do trainings for a week. So that was the rotation. And I think that really we're talking about popular education. One way to figure out how to build trust with the people is to trust the people, but we can only move at the speed of trust. Adrienne Marie Brown, I think, says that. And I think there's something really amazing about being in the South, about being mountain people, that we move at a different pace. And how do we think 10, 20, 30 years as like the pace for which we build our base, right? I think there's the immediate thing right now, and there's an urgency that we know is combative often to the culture of our people. And so how do we embody the steadiness that they're looking for, that people are seeking, while knowing the urgency that we live with? Like, people, it's real shit right now, right? But I think the thing about Virginia, and I spent a lot of time in Virginia growing up. I also worked in Petersburg at the federal prison for a while, teaching theater. So like, I mean, Virginia is just different no matter where you are in the landscape. Each part is different. But I think a steady thing is decentering your ego, right? And like just really, somebody, I think Toshi Regan said something like, you host a dinner, you host a meal, and you keep inviting everybody to potluck every week. And you just keep having potlucks. And we make it as simple as possible. Like, how do we how is freedom not this ethereal concept that isn't tangible, but it's something that's like, that is, I can apply to my everyday life? Where can I find that? That it happens in union organizing and labor organizing. We find a common thread to lift the weight. I'm talking a lot, but yeah. I'm so glad I crashed this meeting.
Yeah, we're grateful for that.
Oh, I was going to say the popular education spiral. That's like, it doesn't belong to us, but it's something that's been used for centuries. Yeah. But that spiral is really clear about, like, it's just a really cool method to try. I think that's really important. There's a bunch of people out here trying legislative theater in some weird ways, like the Mandela Center. I'm all about it. My background's in theater directing, so we can always jam out, but yeah.
Yes, I was just going to add on to your idea, Janae, about having a potluck every week. Something that I thought about was maybe taking away some of the more distant aspects of small talk and actually kind of asking people when you meet them, like, how are your needs being met? And starting off the conversation like that, so that you're kind of always talking about it every day with every person that you're interacting with, and it starts a kind of community conversation that can become a state conversation, and then a group, like a national and global conversation. I think we just have to include these questions and these feelings more in our daily practices.
I totally agree with that, and I think that's why embodiment is so central. It's like, if I know the road to freedom is long, and it's a journey, and I'm not the things I'm feeling, it's not the first time in my whole generation they ever felt that. Like, I'm the closest thing to freedom my people ever seen. And I mean, like, my lineage, each one of us is the closest thing. It took our lineage a long time to get to this point. And so knowing that, it's like, and everybody got to eat. I think when something that's been really helpful for us to get into communities and build base with like everyday people is providing Uber Eats cards where people can get access to Uber Eats, or finding out like their local food places when shootings happen. So like when mass shootings happen in neighborhoods, at schools, police shootings, showing up then to provide meals for people who are directly impacted by that. And then following up in a month, 2 months is I think a really impactful way to build bases.
Food is the ultimate connector, and shared dinner is the ultimate connector. So we've got about, we're scheduled to go to 7:30. We don't have to go that long if the conversation is kind of wrapping up. But
I got a follow-up question.
Yeah, go for it, Ben.
Yeah. Just waiting there. I mean, this has been really useful or helpful to me. And just thinking about that question from that student who's also an activist and came up in Northern Virginia, was really trying to think about how to build actually a mobilization around Youngkin's attack on trans youth. And so they've been trying to do that for the first time. They mostly look towards DC rather than to Richmond, right? So I know that was part of what was motivating the question for them. One thing that seems clear to me is that actually the pace of the movement is very different in different parts of the state. So that's part of the answer is, I mean, it's true in our home state of Wisconsin, but Wisconsin seems a little simpler in some ways. There's maybe 4 or 5 different ways of doing it. Here in Virginia, it seems more complicated. It's more difficult to think about building the statewide project. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. But I'm just recognizing that the pace here is very different. The communities here are just incredibly complex and just, I mean, people are from everywhere here. It's just amazing. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and is being done. So I'm just recognizing that. And then the other thing that seems obvious is to find the places for commonalities, right? In terms of the state project, and just to recognize that not everything's going to be the same. And like, I think about doing dinners, I think that'd be difficult to do around here. And maybe not in Arlington, not in Alexandria, but in this region. Oh, and I said I wanted to turn this to a question. So Patty, I'm going to put you on the spot. As I recall, you grew up in Northern Virginia, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I grew up in Chesterfield County, so
okay, so
Richmond.
Yeah, but so I was wrong, but you've interacted with the Nova folks, right?
Yeah.
So what might it take to sort of, do you have any thoughts about what it might take to get them looking south more, and instead of just to DC?
Well, I would say for Nova residents, it seems like they're kind of they do kind of feel separate from Richmond area.
Yeah.
One of my professors even said that someone said, like, when she had said she's from Nova, someone from another part of Virginia said, "Oh, you're not really like a Virginian."
Right.
So I think that was really interesting. It seems like the culture here is a little more, it is very diverse, but I would say, like, communication wise, it feels a little more kind of conserved to every like neighborhood or every little community that's up here. So I would say if you're trying to create solidarity in Nova, it seems like you have to kind of start one at a time instead of trying to address the whole community. Like you said, there's Alexandria, there's Arlington, there's Fairfax. It's like all these different places up here and they're not really that connected. So I think you'd have to start like in one part and then see where you can find those connections and networks, and then go to the next place and see, okay, does anyone from this area know someone here? Can they connect, and then further expand on that instead of trying to do maybe like, because I feel like if I were to address Richmond, I could just address Richmond at once. So Richmond's I feel pretty united as a Richmond person. But yeah, that's how I would think about it.
Okay, I'm just going to toss this in here, Ben, because so I want to say a year and a half ago, I started this thing called the Creative Interventions Lab at Highlander, where I left DC probably a year into Trump's presidency because I noticed a difference that happened, like physically to the city. And I couldn't live in that type of police state. And so what I also know is that people come to DC and don't think about DC, right? And so with that in mind, I had organizations that were organizing around like prisons and abolition across the South who had connections to DC use their campaigns. And then I would get their campaigns and then have everyone who lived in DC amplify their campaigns for the federal. So I didn't think about Washington. I walked into an acceptance that these people are thinking about the federal world here. They come here not thinking about local politics at all. Clearly January 6th, right? So with that in mind, I just try to use them for what they are. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you want to think about federal stuff. So what does that mean as far as like disruptions inside of their offices that they are working with Congress, or inside of their venture capitalist firms that are trying to think about how to transform the HR policies? And so it really worked well with like the death penalty cases that I was doing, because Trump was trying so hard to like, in the lives of so many federal people. So it was great to think about like people who are on death row in the South who could have never gotten any attention from DC, didn't have the ability to leave, but could use people there to amplify their messaging. So I kind of wonder about the same thing with Northern Virginia folks. Like, I just know that they're probably a certain way that I'm familiar with. And I'm like, how can we, instead of trying to bring them South, right? Unless it's for like a silent retreat where they can sit and think about their whiteness, right? For like 3 days with no outside entertainment. Some white people love to suffer. So it's like, just give the yippies whatever they need to like sit in that, right? Or how do you take your stories and make them responsible and accountable and accomplices for the work further south? And raise all the money, actually. Like, get them to raise the money. Like, that could be their role.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, I mean, I'm going to take the opportunity. So, you know, most of our students are first gen students of color, right, at Mason, and we're now the largest university in the state, and that's representative of this region. So I remember coming out, I came to the founding meeting of the Modern Green Party in 1996 in Middleburg, my first time in Virginia, and I was like, whoa, like, what is this place? You know, and that was my first time in Northern Virginia, and it was very different place than it is now, right? And what it is now is, I mean, it's very different than it was 5 years ago, and what it's going to be in 5 years is very different. So you have, you know, I mean, just when I was talking about the diversity of this region, it's mind blowing for me. Like, I've traveled all over the world, you know, I mean, this region, you know, you have folks who are Palestinian, Kazakh, you know, from El Salvador, from Ghana, Gambia, Ethiopia, you name it. Like, there are all these communities here. And so that's what I meant when I was talking about it being dynamic. So this is, like, to me, this is an opportunity, and also there's a lot of needs because this region is big and it's changing, and it hasn't played the kind of role that I think it's going to play. And, you know, in the past it didn't play the same kind of role. So how do we get it? Because looking towards DC, you know, I don't think is very, I mean, we're doing stuff with DC and Maryland and West Virginia too, as much as possible. You know, like, looking across the board is important, but like looking to I think part of the project is actually to say, well, there's an opportunity to build statewide now where maybe it wasn't there in the past. I don't know. That's what I'm struggling with. You know, and it's not this, I'm not talking about like even Loudoun County is different than it used to be, you know.
Hell yeah, it is.
But yeah, also getting into the money is something I haven't even started doing yet. I haven't met those people yet. I met them when I was in California, but yeah, I haven't met them here yet.
Well, with 5 minutes left, Lindsay, do you want to take us out on an appreciation?
Yeah, I've been quiet over here, but I'm just like frantically taking notes because this is such a good and rich discussion. And I'm definitely going to watch the recording over again too, because there are so many little pieces that are exceptionally profound. I mean, I'm thinking, Janae, about what you said about like building trust by trusting the people, and that it just hits. It's so true and so right. So thank you all so much for this really rich discussion. We want to close out by reminding you that this learning is one in a series. We had one last month in September was kind of our kickoff event. This Virginia's New Economy is our what we're currently in. And then next month in November, we're going to have a learning about people's assemblies and really sharing what we're learning from the Southern Movement Assembly and how the Virginia Solidarity Economy Network can be a channel through which we replicate people's assemblies as well, and where we share this model that may be one that's helpful for GMU's next systems, for example. Join the email list, save the dates, and then just to wrap us up, if anybody wants to share out loud or in the chat any final reflections or appreciations for the group tonight. I just want to thank y'all for hosting this. This has been amazing, and thank you for thinking of the New Economy Network and inviting us to this forum.
I want to sit down with everybody here and have more conversations. So I'm expecting that's going to happen. And just I appreciate the work that went into organizing this. I think it's really valuable. I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope that tonight is a place where we're planting seeds that we can water and grow together.
Yeah, I just want to say too, I think one of the action items that I want to take out of this is like trying to have coffee or do those, like maybe it's a virtual coffee of some sort with everybody, just to sit down and again start to build that trust, right? Like if we don't start, like it will never happen. So and it's not going to always be perfect, but we can start to kind of like develop that over time and see where that takes us together.
Absolutely. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and let's talk soon.